In this video, we're going to go show you how to install Bauer Limited Productions extended lower ball joints on this 99 Miata. So here we have our 99 Mazda Miata drift car project that my class is working on. And what we're going to do today is we're going to show you how to install the extended lower ball joints on this vehicle. Now you notice this vehicle is a little bit different than other Miatas, so some of the stuff might not apply to yours. One thing, we are missing the front sway bar. We actually run a really stiff spring in place of running a sway bar. We also have a custom tube front end on the front from a little accident we had with the car. We're missing the headlights, the front bumper, and some of the inner fender section, so you actually get a better view, but it's going to look a little bit different than what you have. Another thing is we have drift knuckles on the front here, which actually takes and pushes the tie rod closer to the knuckle itself, so that'll be a little bit different than yours, but everything else will be pretty much the same. In order to start out, you're going to lift the car up off the ground and secure it on some jack stands. Here we're operating on a lift, so it'll be a little bit easier, but this can be done on the ground without any sort of special tools.
We're going to start by taking the cotter pin out and the castle nut off of the outer tie rod end. So next we're going to take the castle nut off of the outer tie rod end. It's a 17mm socket. So while the outer tie rod is still in the steering knuckle, we're going to take off the cotter pin. So next we're going to take the castle nut off of the lower ball joint, and it's a 21mm socket. Next we're going to hit the steering knuckle where the outer tie rod mounts to it, because it's tapered, and so you have to hit it from the outside to allow it to drop out. You can also use a pickle fork, but you can split the boot. You can also do that down here, but since we're replacing the ball joint, it doesn't really matter if we rip that boot. So next we're going to remove the lower ball joint from the bottom of the steering knuckle. Use the pickle fork method on this. Just stick it between the lower ball joint and the steering knuckle. You're going to strike on the edge of the front of the pickle fork. Now the ball joint is released from the bottom of the steering knuckle. So next we're going to take the lower shock mount out, and it's a 17mm socket as well as a 17mm end wrench on the back, because there's a nut on the back of the bolt. So the bottom shock bolt is stuck because it's kind of rusted in there. So we're going to give it a tap from the back side to pop it out the front side. So if you push up on the lower control arm, take some of the load off of the shock bolt and pull it out a little bit easier. So now that the steering knuckle is completely detached from the lower ball joint, next we're going to take out the through bolt, and following that we're going to take out the lower ball joint mounting bolt. So now to take the through bolt out, you need the 17mm end wrench, the 17mm socket again. So now that the through bolt is released, we're going to remove that, and then we're going to use the 17mm deep well to get down at this final lower ball joint bolt. It's nice to have the deep well, or you could use an extension just because of the clearance issue. So now that the lower ball joint bolt is out, you can remove your stock lower ball joint.
So here's a side-by-side comparison of the stock lower ball joint compared to the Bauer extended ball joint. So if we put them together, you'll see the ball joint portion is actually a little bit further forward. On the Miata, the only way to adjust the camber is to adjust the eccentrics on the front and rear of the lower control arm. What the extended ball joints do is actually cause the steering knuckle to get pushed out a little bit further, causing you to have more adjustability in camber and actually give you a little bit more camber.
So now, once we have the new Bauer extended lower ball joint, we're going to put it in, and it's going to be a snug fit to get it in and lined up. I like to put the through bolt in first because that'll ensure the lower ball joint bolt in the back there is lined up. The through bolt's in. We're just gonna start that getting threaded. We don't need to torque it down all the way yet, but now that that's lined up, we're gonna put the lower ball joint bolt back here. So the torque spec that we pulled off of AllData told us that the torque spec for this lower ball joint bolt is 54 to 68 foot-pounds. So you can put it anywhere in the middle. I have my torque wrench set at 60. So then we're going to torque our through bolt to spec. The torque spec is between 69 and 86 foot-pounds. So I have my torque wrench set at 75. Set the steering knuckle on our lower ball joint. So next we're going to put our castle nut on. We'll just run that finger tight on for now, just to make sure everything gets held in place. Next we're going to put our shock bolt back in.
Now if you're doing this on the floor, a floor jack underneath the lower control arm will replace having someone push up on the lower control arm.
So our torque spec for our lower shock bolt is also 69 to 86 foot-pounds, so I'm going to leave my torque wrench set at 75. The new castle nut is slightly larger. It's a 22 millimeter socket, not a 21. And the torque spec is between 42 and 57 foot-pounds, so my torque wrench is right in the middle at 50.
Now we need to line up the hole in the ball joint with the castle nut. In this case, we're going to have to tighten it down a little bit more in order to get that to reach the right position.
Get it through over here.
So now this ball joint has 4 holes in it, or 2 holes through it. So this one here we can get our pin through. So the cotter pin's in here to hold this nut so it doesn't come out while you're driving.
So next we are going to put the outer tie rod back into the steering knuckle. So this castle nut is 26 to 36 foot-pounds. So I have my torque wrench set at 30. So it does not come with a new cotter pin for the outer tie rod end, so you have to reuse the one you pulled off.
Now our last step is, if we had a sway bar, is to reconnect the lower sway bar mount, lower sway bar end link to the lower control arm. After that, we can go ahead, we can put our wheel back on and put the car back down on the ground. When this is done, this is going to throw your car out of alignment. So what you have to do is you have to go through and get an alignment done afterwards to make sure everything is within the specifications that you're looking for.